Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to build a quartz watch using the Ronda 515 movement. This watch here is one of the Ronda watches that I built recently. Even though it says automatic on the dial, it isn't. It is actually a quartz movement. Because of the lack of quartz builds on YouTube, I wanted to create a series of videos that uses mainly quartz movements from various manufacturers like Seiko, Miyota, and Ronda. I have way too many mechanical watches already, and I just want a watch I can pick up and go without having to set the time because it sat there for weeks before I could put it into rotation. This isn't a quartz versus mechanical thing. I just want to give watch enthusiasts and builders who love watches a choice. So let's just jump right into the parts list. So we start off with the case, and this is a titanium case. It is very light and it has a sapphire crystal. And I wanted this case because I have a lot of SKX styled cases with the rotating dive bezels, and frankly I have too many dive watches. So I wanted to make something different, and this is the case I chose. I believe this case is based on the Seiko SRPE type of cases where it doesn't have the rotating bezel. Next up, we need a dial. So I'm going to use an NH35 dial, and this is a white one. Again, I don't have a lot of watches with white dials on them, so I thought I'd use this. I've had this dial for a couple years now, and I haven't really found a way to use it, but for this build, I will use this. It's got a stormtrooper on it, and it's got the Seiko logo on it. I typically don't like using dials that have the Seiko branding on it because because it's really not a Seiko. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to find one that didn't have it, so I'm just going to use this for the meantime. Maybe in the future they'll make a dial that where they remove all the branding, and I'll probably swap it out. And here we have the Ronda 515 quartz movement. It is a battery powered, obviously, and it has a date complication. It's a Swiss movement compared to the other ones where I use a Japanese movement with the Miyota or Seiko. And this 515 does come with many variants. So there are ones where you can install a 24-hour hand with GMT function. It's also one of the few quartz movements that have a date complication that lines up with the NH35's date window. It's not perfect alignment. It's off by 0.5 mm. So when you're in the double digits, it looks a little bit too close to the left side. But when you're in the single digits, it looks okay. Next, we have the hands. This is your typical Mercedes style hands for quartz watches, and hand selections for quartz, as usual, is pretty sparse. The hole sizes for these hands are 1.7 mm for the hour, 0.7 for the minute, and 0.20 for the second. Next, we'll need some sort of spacer or holder to keep the movement from moving around inside. So here is a 3D printed one that I designed. There isn't a publicly accessible movement spacer or holder available to download, so I had to design and print one of my own. I'll make it available on Thingiverse for everyone to print some of your own for personal use. If you can't 3D print some of your own, I believe there are some that you can buy online from AliExpress. I haven't personally used it myself, so I can't vouch whether they fit, okay in the NH style watch case, but it's certainly worth trying because they're not that expensive anyways. Let's start off with the build, and before we do that, let's do a wrist check. So this is a watch I built using the same movement that we're going to use in this video, and it is inside a SKX styled case. It also has an SKX styled dial, so it fits the part, and I think it looks pretty good. So these are your typical SKX style cases that you can buy. You can get these for under $20. They're pretty affordable, especially when they're on sale. They usually come with the bezel insert that you could attach later, but we're going to be using this one because, like I said, I have way too many of those other SKX styled dive watches. So first off, we're going to attach the dial to the movement. And as you can see here, I've already snipped off all the dial feet. We're not going to be using those at all. Instead, we're going to be using some double-sided tape to adhere it to the movement right here. First things first is we're going to do a test fit here just to show you how the date window and the date complication lines up. Using the stem, you want to line up the stem to the 3.8 crown position right there, and that will roughly be where you want to attach the dial or stick it. Um, so we're going to use some of these double-sided tape thingies here. You can get a whole bunch of them, a sheet of them for under $20. It'll probably last you a lifetime. You could use other double-sided tape and cut them yourself, but these are pre-cut, so I like using them because they are very convenient. There isn't a whole lot of room around the edge of the movement, so just try to put the adhesive as close as possible without touching or interfering with the date complication. And you're probably going to need about 3 or 4 of these. You don't need too much of them. I find that they hold pretty well, and there is still a bit of give. Like if you need to slightly adjust it, you can still twist it a bit, but it'll still hold in place. Now it's time to remove the backing to expose the sticky part. So I'm going to carefully peel it off here. Now we're going to attach the dial onto the movement, and you want the crown stem to be at the 3.8 or just like one hash mark away from 4 o'clock. So this dial actually has like minute markers around it, so it's easy to do. But typically you want it there for this the SKX style of watches. That's where usually the crown is. You want to center the dial by having the pinion posts in the middle go right through the middle of the dial, and then after you get it in the right place, you just push it down. I'm still kind of fiddling around here trying to get a good placement, and once you have it ready, you can just press on it. It doesn't have to be perfect on the first shot. It may be a little bit off, but because you're using double side tape, you could usually take it out and like slightly twist it if it's not exactly in the right place. But for now, it's good enough. To remove the crown stem, you want to pull out one notch and then use a sharp object to poke that little hole there to release it. Now I'm just going to test fit it for alignment. Before we install the hands, I usually take the case that I want to install it into and then put the movement inside with the dial. And then I want to test to make sure that the dial is aligned. To make things easier, I'm just going to put the movement and dial on this pad here, and I'm just going to put the case on top, and then I'm just going to flip it over. I'll also test fit the movement holder as well, or the movement spacer, make sure it fits. To ensure that it is aligned, we're going to insert the crown stem temporarily, and then we're going to turn it over and see how it looks. Because this case does not have a chapter ring or a dive bezel, even if your dial is off by a millimeter, you probably won't notice it. Here I'm going to attach the crown onto the crown stem here. So I took off the temporary crown, and I'm gonna screw down the included crown that comes with the case onto the crown stem. I'm just doing this temporarily to help me wind the watch or move the hands as I'm installing them. So this is just temporary. We're gonna have to cut the stem later on. But anyways, I'm checking to make sure the movement works. I can set the date. Before installing the hour hand, we want to make sure it's at midnight. So keep turning the crown stem until it flips over to the next day, and that's when you know it's midnight. I'm going to use a little bit of putty here to help grab the hour hand, and then I'm going to put it on the post here. I'm going to get this toothpick here, and it will help me kind of nudge this hour hand so it's right at midnight. You don't want to use anything that's metal or that could scratch the dial or the hands. And then next, what we're going to do is we're going to use this apparatus to help us push the hour hand into the post. I use this thing here. You could use manual pushers, but this one works really well because it goes straight down, so you can't really like uh, push down the hand at an angle, right? So this one goes straight down. So the first pusher in this apparatus will set or will install the hour hand, and I'm just going to push down on it, and that should be it. I'm going to do a couple more taps to ensure that it's on tight, but you don't have to put a lot of force into it. But the one thing I like about this apparatus, like I said, it goes down straight, and there's really no chance of you like installing the hands at an angle or anything. So what you want to do is just kind of move it around the dial, make sure it's not colliding with any indices or anything or scratching the dial, and I think it looks pretty good. We want to put it back at midnight, and then we're going to install the minute hand. Installing hands on a watch is probably the hardest thing when it comes to watch building, but with practice you'll get it. The minute hand is slightly harder than the hour hand because the hole is a little bit smaller now. And again, it's the same technique. We're going to use some putty to hold the hand itself, and then we're going to use this toothpick or tweezers to guide it. And this time around, I'm going to show you with a manual hand pusher, and I'm going to push this down using the manual hand pusher just to get it started, and just lightly here. I haven't pushed it down all the way, but you can see it's kind of not centered, so I'm going to use this toothpick, slightly nudge it over, and then once it's in the middle, we could go back to this apparatus here, and we're going to use the center one, which is for pushing down the minute hand. So we're just going to push this down, ensure that it's going down all the way. And you want to do several light taps. You don't have to go down really hard, but just kind of tap it, move it around a little bit, tap it some more, and that should do it. Now with the minute hand installed, we're gonna actually see if it is working and staying on. We want to make sure that the hands are not colliding with each other or hitting any indices. So turn the hands around at least 1 day rotation and see how they line up. Make sure that it lines up at the 1, 2, 3, at the various times. And when they go back up to midnight, that the date changes, and you can see as I'm flicking over to the next day, it flicked over to 26th, so it is good. I'm also looking at the side to see if they are level, and it looks pretty good. Finally, we have the second hand. Same technique. We're going to use some putty to hold it. I prefer putty over tweezers. And then we're going to use this second hand pusher here. And I kind of lucked out because it went right in. And let's see. We're going to push it down a little bit more. I feel that it's not in all the way, but I'm just going to give it a little bit of a nudge, and then we're gonna push in the crown stem all the way, and we can see that it is ticking away, so it works. Now we're going to install it into the watch, so I'm going to remove the stem, and you can see that it's still ticking away, and I'm going to put it inside the watch case now. Again, we just want to make sure everything is still working. And here I have the crown and crown stem, and we're just going to temporarily insert this in to the movement because we are going to cut it because it's too long. We're going to drop in the spacer as well, and just double checking that everything is aligned and looking good, and making sure we can set the dates and whatnot. Now let's just put on the case back and ensure that we can close it up. We may need to trim some of the movement holder inside if it doesn't close up, but that's easy to do. And now we're ready to do the next step, which is to cut the crown stem because it's too long. Now it's time to use some calipers and measure how much we need to cut off the crown stem. So it looks like it's about 4 or 5 millimeters. Just make sure you measure multiple times and cut a little bit at a time, because if you only have one crown stem and then you cut it too short, well, you're gonna have to order one and it'll take weeks before it arrives. So after we've measured how much we're gonna cut, we're just going to remove the crown stem here from the crown. And again, we're going to measure off how much we're gonna cut off. So I would advise that cut when you measure something and it says like 3 millimeters, maybe like cut off 2 millimeters and then put it in the case. I know it wastes a lot of time, but at least you're being careful. And if it's too long, you could always cut a little bit more. But if it's too short, well, you're screwed if you only have one crown stem. Anyways, I'm gonna be risky here because I have spares of this stem. So if I cut it too short, no biggie. So hopefully I trimmed off the exact amount. I measured off 4 millimeters and I just whacked it off. Okay, so now what you want to do is basically you want to get a file or something and just kind of round off the edges so it's not so sharp. And then we're going to install it back on. I'm just going to use a pair of pliers to help me grip it better. And I'm just going to clamp it and just twist it really tight. If you want, you could use some Loctite, but I've never had a crown unscrew from the crown stem, so it's not really a big problem if you tighten it pretty good. Now with it cut, let's just hope it is the right length, and we're going to install it into the movement. So here it is, and we're going to just insert it through the opening and push it into the movement slightly. It looks pretty good actually. It doesn't seem too short, but I'm having a little bit of difficulty pushing it in. It's probably because of the, my finger gloves. It could be a tad long, but thankfully I cut it too long instead of too short, so I can always take it out and trim it another 0.5 millimeter or so. But before we do that, let's just close up the case again and really see if the stem is good enough. And let's try here. I feel like my finger gloves are getting in the way, but yeah, I think it actually fits. So yeah, it's a perfect cut. So I lucked out. I don't think I need to take it out and cut anymore. One thing to do before we finish up this project is we want to make sure everything is clean and there's no debris inside the case or the glass. So I'm going to take everything out again, and I'm just going to put a blower on it. I'm going to use a microfiber cloth and just kind of clean everything up and make sure that there's nothing in there that could annoy me, because when you see a speck of dust in there, it's just going to be really aggravating. So I'm going to take everything apart. So I'm going to take the stem out, push down on that, release the stem. Now we're going to drop the movement and dial and everything off out of the case, and I could see already there's a little bit of dust and particles and whatnot. So I'm going to use a microfiber cloth on this and just rub on it, make sure everything's clean. And we're also going to use the blower on this just to blow out any dust particles that could be inside. And you want to blow out the dial as well, just in case there's anything on there. If there's any foreign objects on there, you want to get rid of it before you case it up, because it will annoy you later on. So just make sure everything's clean. And we're going to drop the case back on this thing carefully and put in the movement holder and slide in the stem and crown and just make sure it goes in there. And now what we're going to do is put on the gasket. But before we want to do that, we want to grease it up so that it's nice and moist. And I use this little container thing. It has a bit of, I guess, lube, and you just put it in there, you twist it a few times. Then you want to drop it onto the back of the case here. This, of course, is what keeps your watch water resistant or waterproof. It keeps the water out. Obviously, this watch is not dive rated, but it should be good enough for when you're washing your hands or if you're going out in the rain, it should keep, most of the water out. But I wouldn't go diving with this at all or swimming with it because I wouldn't trust the waterproof aspect of it, the rating of it, because it's something that we put together ourselves, but it's good enough. Anyways, I'm gonna set the date and the time and make sure everything is working before we really close up this watch and finish it up. So I'm gonna just use this rubber ball tool. You could use like those metal case back opener or closers, but I'm just gonna use this ball tool right now because that's what I have on my desk. But it should be good enough, and I think we're done. So this is the finished product. We have a quartz Ronda 515 movement in a titanium case, and here it is side by side with my other Ronda watch. This watch is slightly smaller than an SKX styled case. It's roughly 40 millimeters, I think, whereas the SKX styled ones are about 42. So it's a little bit smaller, which I like, and it's much lighter because it is titanium. I think this watch would look good with a leather strap, so I'm gonna get one out of this watch here. So this leather strap I've been wearing for like a year now, so it's kind of weathered. Um, I like them kind of rustic looking, so I don't really like things that look super new. And we'll see how it looks on this watch. And I think it looks pretty good. The strap is very comfortable. I prefer leather. Anyways, the Ronda 515 quartz movement is another option if you like building quartz watches. It has a date complication that lines up relatively well with an NH35's date window. So if you need a date function on your watch, the 515 is a good option. And they also have a 24-hour GMT variant as well if you need that complication. Maybe I'll do another video when I build one of those next time. Anyways, that's it for this video. Hopefully it gives you some ideas or inspirations for your own builds. If you like this video, comment, like, share, subscribe, and you'll hear from me in the next video.